So it's my pleasure to introduce Gabriel Diaz Maggioli, as I was coached this morning. I've had the pleasure over yesterday and today to share the red limo. That would be my Subaru, that going back and forth to our hotel with Gabriel. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about, he's currently the director of the Ludic Center and professor at the National Teachers Education College in Monteverde, Uruguay, and has also spent about 6 years in New York at the New School as the director of the University Language Learning and Teaching Department. If you, again, take some time and you can read through the numerous book chapters and books and papers that Gabriel has been part of the TEAL discourse for a long time. And what I've noticed for my 36 hours, well, we met in Atlanta at TEAL a few weeks ago. But what I've noticed in dinner last night and the time we've had to spend together, Gabriel's a passionate educator. And when he talks about his students and what he's doing with his students and policy and still teaching online while you're here because they still need to be taught while you're traveling around. So I just realized that that's a connection that I've certainly felt and probably a connection that you're all going to feel. So welcome, Gabriel. I don't know if you want to hold it.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's kind of difficult to see. Thank you, BC-TEAL, for the invitation. I have to publicly acknowledge Tyson Seaborn for putting forward my name, suggesting my name to the board of directors. And what I want to talk about today is situated teaching for situated learning. Let me give you a little bit of context. I mean, I'm a rare bird in the TESOL field because I keep my feet on both the general education grounds and the TESOL field. And in the TESOL field, I love the way your association identifies as English as an additional language. Where I come from, we talk about English as a foreign language. While I worked in the States, it was English as a second language. And we know that that's not always true. Even in my country, English would be a third or fourth language to most of the students I teach. And I like the idea of additive bilingualism. And when we talk about English as an additional language, that gives us another dimension, right? The words we use shape the actions we take. And when we put limiting words, we are limiting the possibilities of our students. And what I would like to share with you today are a few ideas around this thing that we call language. And if you go to this, which is the Dictionary of Language Teaching and Applied Linguistics, written by none other than Jack Richards, we have this beautiful definition. The system of human communication which consists of the structural arrangement of sounds or the written representation into larger units. Morphemes, words, sentence, utterances. And in common usage, it can also refer to non-human systems of communication. For example, the language of the bees or the language of dolphins, between inverted commas. We also have this. Any particular system of human communication, see language 1. For example, the French language, the Hindi language. Sometimes the language is spoken by most people in a particular country. For example, Japanese in Japan. And if you go on reading this definition of a dictionary of language teaching and applied linguistics, that is one main source of reference for us, and you have it there, you may tend to believe that this is teaching English is a simple thing, right? Well, you teach them the sounds, they put the sounds together, they get morphemes, and so forth, so on. And the truth is that taking that view of language actually limits the possibilities of the students we want to teach. Because why do people come to us? Why do people want to learn languages? In some cases, because the state mandates it. It's part of the curriculum. They have no other way out. Either learn it or learn it. Some other people need to learn it because unfortunately they have to leave their own communities because of political reasons, economic reasons, or professional reasons, and inhabit a new space. And with the simplicity of this definition, which is, to me, very dangerously hurting our conception. Imagine a novice teacher reading this, right? I came to the realization that language is such a powerful tool, right? It's a tool that we all use in general, unless we have a particular impediment. And we know that with languages, we can declare love to people, but we can also declare war. So language is not just this object that sits out there to be picked, broken into components, given as components. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, Julian Treasure. He gave a wonderful TED talk in 2013, how to speak so that people will listen to you, right? And he talks about the evils of communication. And the evils of communication to him are gossip, judging, negativity, complaining, he calls that viral misery, excuses, exaggeration, which eventually becomes lying, and of course, dogmatism, which makes us confuse facts and opinions. And when I was watching this video, which is 9 minutes long, and it's a precious jewel, where he ends up giving us a toolbox to use language. And he goes back to what? How we use the sounds, how we enunciate, how we use pitch, how we use stress to get a message across. I kept thinking, okay, our profession, we need to admit it, is slowly stopping being a profession and becoming an industry. It's an industry that is guided by what? Well, basically the same entities that benefit us can also hurt us. First of all, English language teaching is a globalizing, colonizing tendency. I come from a part of the world where, unfortunately, in my country, we have no native population. They were exterminated in 1830. So when they ask us, where do your Hawaiians come from? We simply answer, from ships. Because basically our grandparents came from Europe in ships in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. But the rest of Latin America is, particularly South America, is very rich in indigenous languages, languages that are not taught in the educational system, because what gets taught is the language of international communication, English. Great for us, English language teachers, right? But what about what Shelley was just mentioning in terms of identity? So if I were to give us some negative aspects of, or some factors that are affecting the teaching of English as an additional language, I would give you a short list of 8. The first one has to do with the world. The world which is culturally constructed and is socially imposed, the way English is socially imposed on many people. This world does not allow anybody to escape. We have a wonderful commercial now for the National Telephone Company, which is the last Uruguayan without a cell phone. And you see this poor guy roaming the dunes of the beaches alone, looking absolutely lost and not getting anywhere, right? The message is, unless you are connected 24/7, you lose it. Some of you in the first row may have seen me check my phone before Shelley's plenary. I told the university the time difference. I would give him my plenary now. So 4 people sent me urgent messages just before, right? And of course, they all ended with a nicely polite break a leg. Another factor affecting our profession is the actual history of ELT. You look at any development in language teaching, and it claims to be the new thing. It claims to be the answer or the sorcerer's stone that will help all your learners learn as effectively as you want them to learn. That is something that Donald Freeman calls geopolitical transformations. And it's very interesting how the concept goes, because he says methods such as audiolingualism or the direct method or whole language, any method that has been coded as a series of procedures, somehow starts off in the ivory towers of universities or in the language classrooms of the inner circle countries. You guys are part of the inner circle. And that which works for that reality gets translated to the rest of the world, right? So the transformations in language teaching are geopolitical in that sense. There's the issue of access as well. Not everybody has the same access to the English language. Yet, when you look at textbooks, when you look at materials for language teaching, methodologies, they all claim that they work in any context, not considering regional or local conditions. And with the issue of access comes the issue of quality. We may be teaching English now at progressively younger ages, but the teachers who are teaching those kids do not know English, right? And this is a phenomenon that happens around the world. In Latin America, we have been looking at educational reform after educational reform, and the country that started it off was Colombia, right? With Colombia Bilingüe, bilingual Colombia, back in the early 2000s. What they did was they tested all the teachers who were teaching English in the public school sector. And what they discovered is that 80% of those teachers, approximately, had an A2 level. Now, the curriculum progressed like this in high school. 6 years of high school, first and second, A1, third and fourth, A2, fifth and sixth, B1. So teachers were teaching beyond their level of competence. It's beautiful to see new governments take office in Latin America, which is literally, it's Macondo. If you read 100 Years of Solitude, Latin America is Macondo. Garcia Marquez was not inventing anything. The new Minister of Education in Mexico, have you heard what he said? It's not necessary for people to know English to teach English. We're going, no. It's very simple. We're going to give every kid a computer, right? And they're going to learn from the computer, which is pretty much what is happening in my country. We are investing $14 million a year in a program called Ceibal en Inglés. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's the brainchild of people who went on board with the One Laptop Per Child program. So it's beautiful. In Uruguay, everybody has a laptop. Unfortunately, the schools don't always have internet. In the college, we all use our cell phones as hotspots, right? But we all have these wonderful laptops. And somebody said, well, we don't have enough English language teachers. Of course, the budget for language teacher training, and there's only one national college, was $40,000 a year, right? for professional development, bringing faculty on board. But they created this program that cost $14 million a year, by which native speakers, and native speakers only, you had to show your passport, teach a lesson that somebody in the ivory towers of the entity that won the bid for tender creates. So every child in the country has the same lesson at the same time on the same day. And because this is given through video conferences, the teachers, between inverted commas, because they are not teachers, they are native speakers, they know they cannot stray away from the script because they may be watched. Big Brother is watching you. Now, the results of that program are incredible. Just having those 45 minutes a week, then the classroom teacher who knows no English has to do practice lessons twice a week more. For that, she communicates with the native speaker who must know Spanish, who teaches her how to correct the students and what he or she gives them the key. Right? Now, guess what? Teachers don't teach. Some research has shown teachers don't teach those two lessons because they are out of their proficiency zone. So, but the 45 minutes seem to work wonderfully because after 3 years, the test results indicate that children who are in this program reach a B1 level. How about that? Now, when they get to high school, after 6 years of primary, they get 3 years of 45-minute lessons. They start anew because the high school people do not communicate with the primary school people. So lesson 1 is, hello, how are you, what's your name? My name is such and such. And guess what? The B1 level kids cannot do it. Now, this program, you're going to hear more because it's now being peddled as the solution for countries who don't have enough qualified teachers. So stay tuned. Quality. How about the goals? Each of us has a personal goal for learning the language or a personal need. In general, those goals we could divide into personal, social, academic, and a few political, right? The variety of goals is not reflected in the teaching practices that are promoted as standard and best practices, neither are they recognized in the materials. How about teacher education? In most of the world, people who teach English are not teachers. They are people who supposedly know some English, maybe at A2 level. In Uruguay, we have a figure, an administrative figure called the supervisor, whose task is to go into teachers' classes once in a while, see the teacher teach, assign the teacher a grade that will decide whether the teacher has a job the following year or not. I was a national supervisor for ESL in the late 90s, and there were 4 of us. And we did this calculation. If we went to see a teacher and wanted to provide follow-up, we have to clock in a certain number of visits every month. To be able to go back, if I saw you today, to be able to go back and see you and see if you have improved would take me 4 years because of the number of teachers that we had, right? So, because of the need for teachers, there are many quick fixes and short-term programs that are cropping up everywhere. There are some which are of high quality, and others which unfortunately are not of high quality. Graham Block had a beautiful article called The McDonaldization of Language Teacher Education, because that's what we're looking at, right? And I like it in some universities in Latin America, it's McDonald's itself. You can get combo 1, combo 2, combo 3. Now, combo 1, you get a BA in English, where you study BA English literature. Now, you add a few more bucks and a few more hours in your day, and you can do combo 2, BA in literature, English literature, with a major in English language teaching. And then you can go for combo 3, which with a little bit more money and a few more hours, you can also become an official translator and interpreter in 4 years. How about that? Right? Unfortunately, teacher education, because of the pressing needs for more teachers, has been reduced in many parts of the world. I'm generalizing here, but it's an international tendency to something that Freeman calls a technicist epistemology. So when you do your teacher training courses, you learn like the basic instructional techniques, one way of doing reading, one way of doing writing, one way of doing speaking, and that is replicated around the world. Maybe when you try those things out in the classroom, they don't work in your reality, but that is your fault, because these are best practices. They should work everywhere. And then, last but not least, no, I have two more. Sorry. The technology. To me, there's this mirage that technology is going to answer all our problems, and with the advent of artificial intelligence, we are going to just live in paradise, right? I think that technology is the same thing as a course book. A very good servant, but a very bad master. And we were talking about this morning on the way here. We're having wonderful conversations driving to or from the hotel. I was in an online argument with somebody who's a technology person online, right? Because I reposted something Willie Renandia had posted, that good teaching without technology is good teaching anyway, right? And this person wrote, "Why are you posting this? It is borderline irresponsible," she wrote, "for a teacher educator to be making such claims. Technology is the future. And if you don't know technology, you don't have a future." Now, my problem is that technology has never been driven by education, yet education has been driven by technology. The only technology that was created specifically for us was the chalkboard. That's the only technology specifically created for education. And you can quote me on that because I checked, right? And the rest of the technologies came on board because of economics. Learning management systems. Why were they created? Simply to save big companies bucks on professional development for their employees. To reach the more in a cheaper way. And why was technology so wholeheartedly embraced by higher education? Because they fell into the trap. They thought, oh, you have this learning management system. You have one teacher, 1,000 students, right? So you will be cashing in a lot of bucks and spending very little on tuition, on paying your teachers. And we all know that we spend so many more hours teaching online than teaching on site. Sometimes I wish I were only an on-site teacher. I see my students 3 hours a week, one day, one evening. Goodbye, see you next week. Send me your paper by email. Now I have to keep on answering my email, right? People who post at 11:59 p.m., they write at 7 a.m., "Gabriel, you haven't given me feedback on my assignment," right? So, to me, good technology is that which enhances learning. And there's a lot of technology out there which is simply drag and drop. My work at the university has nothing to do with ESL or EAL. I am the director of the Center for Pedagogical Innovation and the promotion of the scholarship of teaching and learning, which means do research on what works in higher education. And we do a lot with students. And somebody came up with the idea to use Kahoot in class. So in one of the student surveys, the student said, "Please tell the teachers to stop using Kahoot. If you give us another Kahoot quiz, we walk out," right? And this is what happens. These apps come, and as soon as they come, they go. They get replaced by something else. Or simply the innovation aspect turns into drudgery. And the last, at least in my context, the opportunities that students have to actually use the language that they are learning, which we know is a determining factor in acquisition. We have the case of the polyglots, those people who learn languages naturally from interacting online. We do have a lot of cases, but guess what? They are the fewest. How many of you have a language learning app in your cell phones? How many of you have used it in the last week? Very few, right? In the last month? So this is what happens. I like to say that when we teach English to our students, we're not teaching them English for now, we're teaching them English for later. Particularly when you work for public education in other countries where they don't have a need to go out into society and use the language. So I go back to the technicist epistemology of methods. People are still talking about methods, even though Kumaradivellu wrote these amazing books on the post-method condition. And then Diane Larson-Freeman and Marty Anderson came and said, wait a minute, I mean, there's something about the methods that works. They are the default settings for our profession. It is as if we said that a surgeon shouldn't practice how to make an incision because that is repetitive, behaviorist, etc. You cannot construct how to make an incision in an operation. But yeah, my take on this is that what methods have done is they have given us some mantras that as a profession we are unreflectively using all the time. For example, the language is a meaningful construct. Is it? I'm going to show you in a minute an example of language that conveys meaning, but it's not necessarily a meaningful construct. How many exceptions to the rules are there? How do you make sense of all the meaning when you're just given lists of words with their translations? Language is a chaotic construct, and its beauty and power lies in that chaos and in the power that it bestows on the individual who can use it to fulfill their own needs. Secondly, language use creates and communicates identity through meaning. But that identity comes with some caveats. Because according to the methods, learning additional languages implies developing new identities. Now, why would I want to stop being myself? Right? When what I want to do is find spaces to be myself in many ways. But the methods have us believe us that. The main goal of language learning is to be able to communicate who I am through the additional language, that is to develop a functional, new linguistic identity. I say no. I am who I am, whichever language I use. And when there are errors, look at this. The hidden message is that errors indicate the evolution of that new alternative linguistic identity. So say I'm one of those perfectionists who, before opening my mouth, ponder every single angle of meaning and syntax to be able to convey the right message. I don't make mistakes. There are no errors in my speech. Does that mean that I'm not, that I'm a non? And Marty and Diane say very clearly, When you take these ideas that are coined by some people who are not necessarily in the classrooms, right? They are in the ivory towers of universities, guilty as charged. It becomes clear that these universal solutions transposed in an acritical fashion and generally accompanied by calls to standardization are far from adequate. Language and identity are intimately intertwined because language interacts with all these identity constituents. Our ability, our religion, our nation state, where we come from, our sexuality, our class, is the context in which these interactions take place that determines the pedagogical and methodological needs of what we can call a very situated teaching and learning environment. So no two teachers are alike, no two learners are alike. In the logic of syllabus design, oh my God, we don't see this happening. Meet my granddaughter, India, that's her name. Just blame the parents. We did everything possible, but anyway, right? Now, this is an example of a very cute example of communicative competence. This is a conversation that my granddaughter was having with her father. I don't want to offend young parents. I'm a father of 5, 31 to 18. They all survived. So I guess I must have done something right. But my son doesn't want the baby to eat any sugar. Well, you know, everything has to be organic and natural. Yeah, it's good, but it's their first. That's the other thing. So what happens? Grandpa goes to visit. And Grandpa's been to the supermarket. And Grandpa's bought some cookies. Yeah, because there comes a moment when I want to pamper my grandchild. I have a right to do that, right? So my son took the bag of cookies from the table, put it on top of the fridge. Now, she was 2.5 years old. Supposedly, she didn't know what cookies were, right? And this is the interaction. I translated from Spanish. Daddy, gimme. Gimme cookie. India cookie. And she was pointing at herself. Of course, all the time my son would say, no, 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 this is not for children. This is not good for you. I'm not going to give you a cookie, right? And then she went like, this cookie. Right? Again, this cookie. And then what did Grandpa do? Picked up the cookie, opened the package. She snatched the package from my hand and said, Papa, cookie, no. Now, if these functions, the exponents of the notions in these functions were coded into a syllabus, what we would get is something like this. So here's my proposal. And I have how long? 15 minutes, right? Let's find out. It's a crazy thing, right? But maybe if we found out why people need to learn a language and the context in which they need to learn the language for, we could be a little bit more effective. I love the Belgians. The University of Leuven in Belgium, they have one of the biggest think tanks in task-based learning in the world, right? And talking to a teacher, and I don't know her name, I wrote it somewhere, but I cannot give her credit. She was just a teacher, not an academic, not a researcher. I saw her, I was in Leuven for a conference, and then we met in the conference, we talked, and then I saw her during my tourist days, walking around the streets of Leuven with a flock of students behind her. So I said, hey, hi, what are you doing? I said, I'm teaching a class. What? Yeah, I'm teaching a class. These are my students. And I said, mind if I tag along? And she explained me the system. They build their syllabus around roles of the adult English as an additional language learner. And they work both in the classroom and in the community. They have, in Leuven, they speak not French, Flemish. But they have identified people and businesses in the town, which is a beautiful little university town, who speak English. And they take the students to English-speaking establishments to practice. And I find the simplicity of their organization is mind-blowing. They say some people are family administrators, right? And they have contact with official agencies. They need to talk about housing, monetary transactions, insurance, welfare, social security. The other role is consumer. Contacting stores, health, mobility. They are also students. So they are course or educational program, admission, tuition. Parent or caregiver. Of course, I'm talking about adult learners, right? And I keep thinking there will come a day when I will try to do the same thing for children, but I haven't had the time. Job seekers or employees or potential employers, entrepreneurs. And then allocator of leisure time. How about that? The person who decides. And what they do is they build around the roles. These roles are, because all adults inhabit all the roles, they rotate from week to week. So they create tasks that they need to accomplish in the real world. And it's not just a pedagogic task. Right? We do the pedagogic task in the classroom, and then we go out and we test it out, right? And I thought, that is an interesting idea, because at the same time we're learning the language, we are also learning something which is inextricably intertwined with language and identity, and it is the culture, right? Most of the gaffes that immigrants make are not language gaffes. They're cultural gaffes. I learned English all my life with the audiolingual approach. Repeat after me, right? When I was 17, my parents decided that I needed to leave home. In Uruguay, we don't leave home to go to college. So they sent me to the States in one of those youth exchange programs, right? And I had very nice English. I landed in Los Angeles in a host family that had 4 girls. And they had asked for, they chose me because my name was Gabriel. Their face when they saw me at the airport, that was precious, yeah. But then they decided, okay, he can stay. They gave me the basement. I had my own bathroom. I was in paradise. And then this was in the San Fernando Valley. And I went to El Camino Real High School. That was the name of my school, the Royal Highway High School, which was up in the hills of the San Fernando Valley, right? So I couldn't drive because that was forbidden for international students in this program, but all my friends could drive. So they gave me a bicycle, but anyway, let's admit it. Going uphill is not fun. So the mother of the family said, Gabe, why don't you tell Johnny, who's the next door boy with whom I had never interacted in my life. I just saw him, well, I saw him in church because I was forced to go to church on Sundays. It's part of the cultural exchange. He said, why don't you ask him to give you a ride home from school because he has a car. So imagine, 1981. Those of you who were alive, you can think back to what we looked like in 1981. Los Angeles, public school, parking lot for students, out of Saturday Night Fever, exactly. So I woke up to Johnny and said, hey, Johnny, remember me? I'm Gabriel from next door. Oh, yeah, dude, what's up? Would you be so kind to us to give me a ride back home? Silence. dude, why are you speaking like my grandmother? That's the cultural thing, the social cultural thing that we couldn't do it. And when we teach culture in English as an additional language, not in countries where you're like yours, most of what we get on textbooks is folklore, food, and festivals. And that's culture, right? Now, there's this guy, Garza, who has a very short video on teaching culture. You can Google it on YouTube. It's from 2010. And he has this amazing quotation: learning the culture of a language does not only allow us to be competent in that language, it allows us to be proficient in it. And with it comes the fact that, yeah, the artifacts of the culture are interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Fantini. He says, yeah, they are concrete proof from the culture, but they are not enough, right? You don't need only artifacts, you also need mentifacts, which are the attitudes, the values, the ideas, and the meanings that are conveyed through those. And you need the sociofacts, which is how people interact socially. To teach culture, you need to bring them all together, and that is when you develop intercultural communicative competence, right? So all these things in the context of a theory of language learning, which, if we go by the work of Long, here's a wonderful 2015 book where he summarizes the latest discoveries in second language acquisition, and he calls his theory instructed second language acquisition, which consists of, if we analyze it, debunking all the methodological myths that we have been explaining before. For example, we learn both through prefabricated lexical chunks and also grammar rules. It's not that you just expose people to the language and they will pick it up someday. Some will never pick it up unless there is an explicit intentional teaching of those things. Yeah, meaning has to be the focus at all times, because what we are looking for is actual communication, transactions. Now, every learner comes with their own inner syllabus. So this is going back to Ausubel, 1976, Educational Psychology. The first sentence says, if you ask me to give one rule about teaching and learning, I would say find out where the student is at and teach from there. Then input is good, but input alone does not work. You need opportunities to use that input, and there is where interaction with their peers is most significant. If we connect these ideas to the broader field of education, the work of Hattie in New Zealand, for example, or Marzano in the United States, they both have identified as the #1 predictor of academic success the approach that we can call reciprocal teaching, when students work with each other and learn from each other. And then, of course, assessment. Assessment, but more importantly, feedback. Feedback that is not just informative, it's formative, right? Doing my own research, I came up with this idea of scaffolding, right? And if you want to learn more about this, I have a workshop tomorrow where I'm going to show scaffolding moves. But basically, scaffolding is a term that we have used and abused in our profession. It has become literalized, right? So for some people, scaffolding is direct teaching. For some others, is simply facilitating. Now, scaffolding that is organic, that gets the job done, complies with certain conditions. There's an issue of engagement. Both parties have to be engaged. There are some prerequisites, like background knowledge from the students, that needs to be seen to. There's an orientation, right, to how the interaction must go. And it engages more than language. Language is just one semiotic system. There are others. And finally, the sources of knowledge that organize the interaction should come from what is socially requested, if you wish. So these are the characteristics that I have named for these characteristics of organic scaffolding, and I define it as an interaction where the expert, and the expert is not necessarily the instructor, it could be a peer, right? Interacts with the novice, the person who knows less, in order to progressively transfer control over the activity to the novice. That is true organic scaffolding, when you are releasing control of the activity over, it's like playing, yes, I'll get there. So how do we do it in real life? Well, basically there are two moments to teaching. A moment when we plan what we want to do, so we can call that designed in scaffolding. And the context of interaction will determine the moves that we make on site, the contingent scaffolding, right? But look at the difference, right, of how much control I as a teacher have over this, right? So let me give you an example of how to make this happen, right? I did a beautiful piece of research. I say beautiful because I learned so much on an expert English as a second language instructor. I followed that person for 1 complete year, taped every single lesson that that person taught, and then this person teaches the same course, 1 semester on-site and 1 semester online. So I got permission to go and lurk in the learning management system and see him interact with his students. And I took him as an example because he's a highly successful teacher, a teacher at heart, right? And what we discovered, because it was a dual thing, he was the participant in the research, but he was very generous. Without him knowing, he had developed his own pedagogy. And I've been transferring this pedagogy to other contexts, and it's worked. The first thing he does is he identifies what learners should be able to do as a consequence of his teaching. He calls them objectives. But it's more or less looking at the role and the language needs for that role. He then, in class, starts off with something that hooks the student's attention to meaning. A situation, a cartoon, a clip, a song, you name it. Then he introduces the new language via a pedagogic task. He creates a pedagogic task that will elicit the new language that he wants to teach. After that, he saturates the feedback on the task with examples of real-life language in use. In print, in audio, you name it. Multiple semiotic systems. Then he checks understanding by asking students questions, posing exercises, etc. Then practice, good old traditional control practice, semi-control practice, free practice, right? Get your hands dirty with the fill in the blanks and transformation of sentences. After that, when he does feedback on those activities, he summarizes the new concepts by eliciting from students, what are we learning and why are we learning this and where can you use it? So he does all the metacognitive guidance for them. Then he gives them an application task. And that application task implies that they have to use the newly learned language in a new context. And again, he checks understanding. And then he gives an individual assignment for students to go and do in real life. It could be online, contact somebody on Skype, you name it. So if I look at this pedagogy, we see that what he does is he promotes 2 kinds of scaffolding. He engages with students in dialogic teaching, good old dialogic teaching. Dialogic means two-way, not I talk to you, you listen to me, right? He provides formative corrective feedback, and he creates what Mercer has called an intermental development zone, right? Whereas cognition does not reside in your head, nor does it reside in my head. It resides in the opportunities for exchange of meaning that we have. What I like about this instructor and about these ideas is that I'm looking at what makes people unique. And I'm going to leave you with a little reading from one of the most well-known Uruguayan authors. I don't know if you've ever heard of Eduardo Galeano. He wrote a book called The Open Vase of Latin America. Well, what I'm going to share with you is a little anecdote from page 1 of a book called The Book of Hugs. It's not a mushy, no, it's a very political thing. And he says, he writes, a man of the town of Negua on the coast of Colombia was able to climb to the high heaven, and on his return he told the story. He said he had contemplated from above human life and said that we are a sea of little fires. The world is that, he revealed, a cluster of people, a sea of little fires. Each person shines with their own light among all others, and no two fires are alike. There are large fires and there are small fires, and fires of all kinds and colors. There are people of serene fire, unaware of the existence of wind, and people of crazy fire who fill the air with sparks. Some fires, foolish fires, do not shine or burn, but others burn life so heartily that you cannot observe them without stopping to blink. And whoever gets close flares up. So my wish for you guys, let's have our students' fires burn bright. Thank you very much. Thank you. And you have coffee now.